Look, we all know that this was never going to be a great movie, but even so, I was still surprised at the strange ways in which this was bad. Hey everyone, I'm Tom from Like Stories of Old. Welcome to this second channel where I review movies and talk about some other stuff. Today, I wanted to talk about mercy.
I loved my wife. I didn't hurt her.
If you are innocent, prove it.
Honestly, I did go in willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. You know, the trailers didn't look very compelling. It just looked very generic, but I did like the premise of it, and mainly the idea of a man being put on trial and having to prove his innocence, and in doing so he can make use of this AI system that lets him access all the video footage that's pretty much available, or all the information that's available on the internet or on the cloud, as it is used in this movie, where everyone's private videos and everything gets uploaded there, and he can just access everything to kind of sort through the case and plea for his innocence, basically.
Bring that back. Pause. Play it again.
And the reason I thought it was interesting is because I do feel like there's an interesting reflection here on the culture, or rather the surveillance state that we currently have, which is usually sort of interpreted as the government spying on citizens from like a top-down position, but which I think over time has proven itself to be more of this bottom-up emergent phenomenon where everyone's just constantly surveilling everyone around them. You know, we have these Ring doorbell cameras. We're constantly filming everything of note that happens with our phones. There's drones overhead. There's dash cams on cars. You know, when you take everything together, there's just such a collective image that we have created of like every single moment, which theoretically should give us access to a lot of truth, right? You know, we can look at things from different angles. We can always check back and find evidence on video footage. And that's what the movie kind of deals with in the beginning. But the flip side of it is that, as we are also seeing right now, especially in the United States with the ICE shootings, and which are all filmed from different angles, and yet people have like wildly different takes on what happened, even though the footage or the evidence in the footage appears to be right there. And so the tricky thing is that, you know, even though we have all this access, we have all this video footage, we're constantly filming each other from every angle, there's still a debate on how to spin the narrative, or there's still leeway to create false narratives and to get mistaken even, maybe, or to kind of become self-deluded by your idea of a narrative that then gets disproven or altered in some way by footage. And the movie, of course, doesn't really do anything with it, but it did make it so that I was giving it the benefit of the doubt for a good 20-30 minutes or so. And I still think, you know, if this was like a low-budget Scandinavian movie, there was genuine premise or genuine potential to this premise. But again, of course, that's not what happened here.
Good. Wow. Thank you for that.
Mr. Raven, the clock is ticking.
You know, for one, I think a lot of people said that the movie looks kind of cheap, and it kind of does. Like, it has very cheap special effects, but I think it actually looks overproduced in some way. You know, visually, or just like as a sensory experience, this is just such an assault on every sense, basically, that you have. Like, I'd honestly recommend, if you want to watch this, to watch it at home, because it's kind of a jarring experience. Like, it's not a pleasant sensation, because you have Chris Pratt in this chair, and you know, he can pull up all these different images, he can browse websites and whatever, but it all sort of pops up and flashes in random places, and then it whooshes over his head, and then there's an image that pops up from there, and it goes like this, and they even have like his hair and his shirt will blow, as if there's like physical presence to these images, which of course there isn't. So I joked in my Letterboxd review that there must be some kind of wind, you know, in the world of this story, there's a wind machine in the room that they're in to make the whole trial more immersive or something. But anyways, it's just such a random visual style of sci-fi mumbo jumbo and just random visualizations that I think actually if they had more restrictions with like a lower budget, it would have felt, much more grounded, because that's the second thing. It just feels so unbound from anything that is even remotely realistic, that makes me even remotely buy into the reality of this world. Because now it doesn't feel lived in, it just feels fake in every asset, the way the computer browses, even the way images are pulled up. People walk around with FaceTime, that's something that you always see in a little bit with these mixed format style movies. But in this movie especially, it was a little bit silly, the extent to which everyone had to be filming at the right moment for the footage to be available. But again, if it was like a more like low budget, maybe a European thriller, this that kind of dives into the extent to which we are constantly surveilling each other, I think it could have been a lot more interesting, and it could have been like a poignant reflection on that aspect of our society. But the movie instead, it just goes for this visual mush that's just constantly assaulting you from every direction at every second. And it's literally like unpleasant, like physically unpleasant to watch.
I need us to walk the scene.
So we have Chris Pratt playing Chris Raven. He's the main sort of cop who helped build the system that he's now being subjected to himself. And I don't know, I used to like Chris Pratt a lot. He was one of my favorite characters in Parks and Recreation. And, he was such a fun, uninhibited actor. And I was so happy for him when he got like his big break with Guardians of the Galaxy. Even in Jurassic World, I thought he was, I don't think his character was well written, but I did still like the presence he brought to it. But, over time, I think ever since Chris found Jesus, or, he joined the church, I'm not sure which one, I think it's some denomination of Christianity, he just became such a bore. He seems to insist on playing all these very mopey characters, and he's a very, like, biblical character in some way. He's like the traditional lovable sinner, someone who's lost his way and then rediscovers it again, even though it's not through the faith in God, but rather through faith in, this AI system, which at the end makes it this weird amalgamation of both, a propaganda movie and a pro AI story. And that's just another aspect of this movie that was so jarring for me. The way it almost feels like it belongs in 2005, where we had that kind of vision of AI still, which seems completely outdated now, given what we know of the state of AI as it is now. Because, the thing is, without spoiling too much, there really isn't much to spoil. There's a twist in this movie who ends up being the actual bad guy, but it is so obvious because there's literally one other significant character, one other named character whose name is dropped like over and over, and who's injected in all these random situations to make sure you don't forget about him. And so then when the twist comes, you're like, oh yeah, I'm guessing it's probably him then, and indeed it is. But anyways, the thing about the AI in this movie is that it starts out as this very procedural, your basic LLM basically. It doesn't feel anything, it doesn't create in a literal sense. It's just looks at the facts, it puts everything together, it works with the input that it is given. And over time there's like this weird conflict with Chris's character, Chris, who then talks about, it's also important to have like a gut feeling and to trust your instinct, which of course the AI doesn't have because that's not what it's programmed to have. But then at the end, that the AI does seem to arrive at some kind of moral revelation that makes it connect to Chris's character. And it just feels so, just that idea of an AI system finding like actual humanity, it just feels so, to me it just felt so out of place in a time where I feel like we're coming to the realization that the AI or the state of AI has, to me at least, it feels like it has kind of plateaued, at least as far as the LLM large language models go. And that there's never going to be like the idea that there is a ghost in the machine that just, to me, points to a kind of delusion that we have. It just points to the extent to which we're letting ourselves be tricked by an LLM rather than, finding an actual consciousness in them. But the movie just takes this all at face value. It just genuinely doubles down on the idea of this AI being capable of learning and capable of making moral decisions, because that's what it does at the end. It sort of breaks its own protocols to side with Chris against the revealed bad guy. And they win the day, and they embrace each other virtually, and there's really like a sentimental conclusion, like, oh, we're just both doing what we're programmed to do, and we make mistakes, but we learn from them. And it does feel like infused with a kind of Christian moral sentiment where it's all okay as long as we're just repent and forgive and so on. But again, all that just felt completely out of place in a modern discussion on the integration of AI into every other facet of our society, and the idea that, oh, we should embrace it because maybe there is, or we can teach it some kind of humanity after all. It's just, I don't know, I'm not in a place today where I'd buy that.
Detective Raven, I'm Judge Maddox, and this is the Mercy Capital Court.
Hold on, just wait a second.
You're before this court today charged with the murder of your wife.
On that note, Rebecca Ferguson is also completely wasted here. She has such talent, and she doesn't have to bring, she's not capable of bringing very much to this. I honestly think it would have been better if she was just a disembodied voice and didn't have like a face at all. But again, I think that would have been much more suited for like the smaller scale version of this that I mentioned earlier. Like I can still imagine like there's a great sort of Scandinavian thriller in here that's made for like, I don't know, €2 million US dollars. That is not just this overproduced CGI sludge fest with a nonsense plot that goes nowhere really, that has a predictable twist, and that's just altogether a bad time at the movies.